Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, we are talking about how businesses today are evaluating and deploying CPQ technology for their Dynamics 365 solutions. CPQ, or Configure Price Quote, is a software category that can be applied in some pretty creative ways across various industries. And my guest, Peter Willemse, Vice President of Product Management at Experlogix, shares some examples of industry use cases and some of the complexities that businesses must consider. CPQ, or Configure Price Quote, is a software category that can be applied in pretty creative ways across various industries. My guest, Peter Willemse, Vice President of Product Management at Experlogix, shares some examples of industry use cases and talks about some of the complexities that businesses must consider. As you'll hear, organizations are grappling with everything from pricing strategies to services to custom integrations. Experlogix is the sponsor of this episode, and Peter gives us an update on how he sees Experlogix CPQ aligning with the evolution of Microsoft's business applications. He also explains what the company's broader roadmap looks like, including the company's vision for CPQ, document automation, and commerce. Okay, well, hello, Peter. Welcome to the podcast. Can we maybe start just by having you give us a bit of an introduction of yourself, your role at Experlogix?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jason. My name is Peter. I've been at Experlogix for 8 years. Before I joined this organization, I was active in the Dynamics channel. I had several roles in the Dynamics world, varying from initially implementation consultant to sales to pre-sales to general manager. So I had several roles in the Dynamics channel. And from there, I started the US subsidiary for Econ Solutions, a product configurator in the Dynamics world that later was acquired by Experlogix. And in my current role, I'm VP of Product Management at Experlogix, which means that I'm responsible for the product management teams in our organization that cover both CPQ, digital commerce, and document automation.
Well, welcome. Great to have you here. And I think I say this whenever I talk to someone in the CPQ world. I love the topic of CPQ, especially, and how it touches all these other business areas. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. I thought we could maybe start with setting some basic definitions and concepts. Many people have an understanding of what CPQ platforms do. Perhaps, they've experienced them to some degree themselves. How do you explain the opportunity to people and to businesses today?
Glad to hear that we share the same passion for this. So CPQ, interesting enough, is part of everybody's lives, right? And I can give you a couple of examples. So first of all, CPQ stands for Configure Price Quote, right? In the past, we would call this guided selling or a product configurator. So what it does is, and let's break it up in three pieces. First, the C of configuration. We try to simplify and optimize the complex quoting processes, right? The world has become more complex. A sofa used to be a sofa. Now a sofa has a USB charger in it and an electronic footrest and all kinds of components that make the production of these things much more complex. And products typically get sold with subscriptions now. You buy a Tesla, you have a subscription on the autopilot, right? So a product is not just a product anymore. It's sold with services, either subscriptions, recurring services, or one-off services, right? We can sell furniture, but we also need to install it on site into a new building, right? And there's a lot of services involved. So things have become more complex, and therefore more mistakes are made when we deliver those services and products, right? So we needed solutions that fix the challenge of selling complex things with people who might not know everything. Now, I said, if you look at CPQ, the C stands for the configuration piece. We, I think, all have bought a car here or there, where we went online in a website and we could configure a car with all kinds of options in the model, and we chose a series, right, and the engine, and the wheels of this version don't go with that package, and this color is only available for the high-end version and whatnot. Now, I'm old enough to have bought a car in a showroom where the dealer had a list of options on a piece of paper, and we'd get a call the next day like, hey, remember the choice you made? Yeah, that's not possible, I checked. So it would take more time to configure a quote and a product than we did these days, because it just takes more time to make those selections and do rework there, right? So you basically configure a product, but this could also be a funeral or road assistance services or a implementation project of a software company that has a lot of complexity, and the setup of the solution drives the amount of service that you need and the type of services you need, right? And the number of countries you have. And is it only F&O or is it BC or is it CRM? There's much more involved. So the configuration of what you sell has become much more complex. It could be a off-the-shelf item with options that you simply build. It could also be that there's engineering involved, right? So I sell wheelchairs and I need a joystick on the left side instead of on the right side. Well, I need to check with my colleagues how that works and how much time we need to build that and what materials we need. So products have become more complex, and therefore teams struggled historically more with selling these complex products and services. That's the C of configuration. And of course, the P of price comes in. Let's go back to the example of the car. I have already selected 3 options, maybe the heated steering wheel and a glass panoramic roof. And now I select the premium package, and it already holds those specific additional options in that package, right? So the pricing of a complex product can be difficult to do if you have to do it manually or in Excel or simply without a solution and have to key in an order line in an ERP or a CRM system. So the P of CPQ helps to price things aligned with the options that you have chosen to do up and cross sell, and price that correctly. But also maybe with dynamic pricing. I don't know if you have ever bought a airline ticket, but it's impossible to get the same price from an airline 3 times a day, right? It's always different because the pricing is dynamically based on the time you book, the area you book, the browser from where you come, and all kinds of options and variations that drive that pricing. There could be dynamic bundles, right, that are used for pricing. There could be so much that involves pricing, and also the insight in pricing, right? So is this the best price, and can we use AI, for example, to get a better price? So the C stands for price, and make sure we offer the right price to the client when the configuration options have been chosen. Then if you look at quoting, of course, has also become more complex. The Q of CPQ. We need to deliver an attractive document that looks very nice, but also has all the right information in it. It needs to be super good looking these days. And we need to embed pictures of the configured products in there. We want, approval workflows maybe to get it out of the door. E-signatures on them. We need to store them in several places. We want an online portal, or we give the client the information to look into and to redline maybe some contracts. So there's a lot involved in the Q piece of CPQ. So all in all, as said, it's to simplify the quoting process of complex products and services from the initial touch point of a customer until the contract is fulfilled.
Well, thank you for that explanation. Yeah, and it's so much in there to talk about, really. One thing I do think about is sort of where CPQ is getting a lot of attention these days. You mentioned a few industries just in your explanation there. Are there industries where CPQ product configurators are perhaps gaining popularity recently?
Good question. So historically, these type of solutions were used in manufacturing, especially in discrete manufacturing, right? So forklifts, trucks, right? Heavy equipment is typically an industry where people expect a solution like this and kind of cannot even function without it, right? Furniture, just mentioned, very big on configurators. But these days, we see it almost everywhere. As said, a funeral organization, right? When you organize funerals, these companies are typically large. They have a lot of subsidiaries where they have different services they offer, cremations, burial, all kinds of things. And depending on the service that you need, there's thousands of options to go through. So some of our largest clients actually sell funerals. You bought a package in the past, what still fits in there, what would be options to add. I want to configure the tombstone in the portal online, see how it's going to look in a certain shape and form and what that price would be. I need to upload the file of the family members that come in and into the ceremony, and then we need to send them an invite, right? So there's a ton of things you can consider because industries these days, I don't know if you see the same, need to distinguish themselves from the competition, right? And they don't do that by selling the same products and services. They want to be unique. So they try to come up with new product features or new services in addition to or on top of what they already sold in the past. And that makes it more complex what they offer. And the risk that they offer at the wrong terms or the wrong price also increases with that. On top of that, we see that people stay less long with one company. So they change employers more frequently these days, especially with pressure on the economy and growth and personal growth. That people also need to onboard new sales teams faster than they did in the past. So they have less time to train them before they need to be productive. So in almost every industry, we have catering services for airlines as a client, software companies that provide data insights to other companies that sell data, right? So it's kind of used in almost every industry that you can imagine. If you look around in your room and you see the products that you have on your table, almost everything is configurable, either because the product is complex or the assortment is super complex. We have a very big brewery as a client, and they sell super complex assortments with all kinds of drinks and food. And depending on the variations, there can be a number of different prices for each product and product group that have to be combined in bundles. And Now, you can imagine how complex that becomes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not limited to classic manufacturing anymore. It's all across. And I would say when we moved from 90% manufacturing in the past to I would maybe say 60, 40, 50, 50 manufacturing and any other industry you can think of these days.
Boy, you've covered a lot of ground there and so many possible things to talk about here. If I was going to maybe try to narrow it down a bit, though, I mean, I think what it comes down to for any type of industry is trying to evaluate the value and the opportunity of making this kind of investment. How do you help companies think about the ROI or maybe the cost and the revenue side and how it all works out in their favor if they do pursue CPQ investments?
I think, Jason, this is the most important part of what we're going to talk about today, because it's not only related to Experlogix, it's related to any IT project, digital transformation project we're looking at. Right? I'm personally very passionate about this. So when you look at an investment you're going to do, I'm a business owner myself, right? So every investment should always wonder, how does it bring me enough value to justify the investment, right? That's what they call ROI, the return on investment. I once did a presentation, I think it was on a Dynamics trade show, and the whole room was full of people looking for a demo. I said, guys, we're not going to do a demo. We're going to talk about how you earn back your future investment, right? So who in this room has a quantified list of business improvements they're going to be looking at with this project? And I think, Jason, that a third of the people in the room raised their hand. I said, okay, so 2/3 of you are going to make a gut feel decision to buy a multi-million-dollar, ERP or CRM solution. Awesome. So out of the third that raised their hand, how many of you have really made a calculation and assessed how serious you are about achieving those benefits? And I think half of them lowered their hand. So 15% of the room had looked at the top 5 business benefits they were going to be looking at with that solution and also quantified that. Could they really achieve those benefits? And then we went into methodology to make these investment calculations, how to do this. But the interesting fact is that a lot of them were going to make a decision based on functions and features. And also, if I ask them then, okay, so how did the sales cycles go so far? Most of the people in the room had a demo on their first call. Well, to answer your second question. So their buying journey was also, let's show me the good features and I'll look at the best features and then I'll just buy them. I said, okay, so let's change this around. What if we would sit down, and we actually used to do that also and still do. I said, guys, we're looking at the CPQ implementation here. I don't think you need it. And then the customer would say, well, what do you mean? Well, I don't think you need CPQ. Yes, I do. I said, hey, tell me why. Well, my quotes take 6 weeks. I said, so what's the problem with that? Well, I have a risk that they go to a competitor. Okay, so how many you think you can win more if you can quote within a week, right? Okay, so much. Okay, that's one. What's the other problem? There's just one problem. Just, make sure that you add more people to the sales team. Okay, I also have a problem with rework, right? I have quoted, and then when the quote goes out, it appears I used the wrong bill of materials for the quote, and I have to go back to the client, etc., etc. You start to get the picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we would look for a top 5, maybe even a top 10 of the business issues and say, okay, so what do you need to fix those, right? And in some cases, the conclusion was, just add some people. It's cheaper than build this huge solution that you would have to build to get it done. In most cases, it wasn't, thankfully. Let me give you an example. We were talking to another funeral organization in the north of the Americas. They had 200 salespeople. And on average, these people would spend 2 hours to create a quote for a funeral. And they were spending a lot of time to researching, which location had time when, and this customer wanted a burial, not a cremation. Oh, it's only there. Now we chose the wrong location. What kind of casket is needed? Who would pay for what services? What did they buy in the past already? So 2 hours on each quote. When we went through the optimizations and their business case and we set a demo up for them, their estimation was that they could handle the quoting process in 15 minutes. Now, you don't send away a family in grief in 50 minutes. So they assessed they would still sit for an hour with the family to give them more personal attention, means better quality, right? They could halve their quoting time. Now, 200 people with half of the time. That means either you can deal with a lot of less staff or you can sell much more depending on how much leads you can generate, right? So the business case was huge, only with that one aspect, right? So if we step back and we look more into business case calculations, right, and help customers, because that's what we do today, we really try to emphasize the business benefits, and which helps us in a couple of areas. It takes away the pricing discussion, because now the quote is not expensive. The quote might be unfeasible and we need to finance this. But if the customer sees the business case and believes it's feasible with the right supportive information, right calculations, they are going to move. right? So that's number one. Second, it helps us also to drive the projects in a better direction. So we all know when a project starts, there's no change, it will adapt to the standard, and then no things start, right? So every time you get a question for a customization or a change in that direction, you can go back to the business cases. Hey, we had a top 10 of goals here. Does this change request help to bring us closer to that goal? And if not, good, then we'll do it in phase 2. And if it does, good, then we all make the right decision here. We know that the cost is justified. Right? So it helps to focus the projects. So to go back to your question, how do we help? On the one hand, we try to help our clients to identify the right business benefits and focus on achieving that ROI. So it's not just the go live is the goal. No, do we achieve those items at the go live? And on the other hand, there's the cost side, which is the other side of ROI, right? So you have the opportunity side where you can increase the quality, you can work on other things there, or you look at the cost side and reduce the cost that you need to establish this solution. If you look at the cost side, we made quite a change in our product portfolio. We have 3 solutions, right? We have a e-commerce solution, we have a document generation and automation solution, and a CPQ solution that fit together, but can also be sold standalone. And what we did is especially around the integrations, we saw quite some need. And this must not be new to you looking at previous podcasts. The Dynamics ecosystem is standardizing more and more, right? But we do see that every implementation, I think research shows 70 to 80% of the VC, CRM, and FNO deployment are customized, right? There's a lot of customizations in those, and we need to work with that. When you demo your ISV solution in the initial stages, it always seems to fit, right? We show the base flows we have, it all seems to fit. And then when you go in the implementation, there might be cases where you need customizations around integrating your product into Dynamics or other platforms, right? Past, we would make those customizations, and that would, of course, increase the total cost of ownership, so the cost side of the ROI calculation. We have redefined our integration strategy and rebuilt our integrations now in such a way that there are no code. And I don't mean low code, no code. So we kind of understand the structure of the systems we're working with, which is in our case, finance and supply chain, Business Central, CRM, but also Power Apps, and also even Microsoft Commerce and the intelligent order management system, right? Supply chain. So anything Microsoft covers in the business area, we can work with. And it doesn't matter if it's standard, if the partner or the customer built customizations, if there's an ISV solution like a To Increase or Anata or any IP from any other Dynamics partner, we can work with it with no changes. It's just setup, which means if there's a solution today and Microsoft comes out with new functionality in the April or the October wave, we can add that with no code. We can work with that. We can create records in a rental solution or in a professional services add-on or anything. So it dramatically decreases the total cost of ownership and the predictability of the project, right? Because if you make a change, the project could be delayed. And the funny thing is, when we made a lot of ROI calculations, the cost of delay is significant. So if you go live 3 to 6 months later, your ROI also starts 3 to 6 months later. If you go back to the example of 100 salespeople that are needed less or can do much more in their time, that's a huge difference 3 or 6 months sooner or later, right? So on the revenue side, we really try to focus on what are we trying to achieve and help the client to understand those changes. And we can even make calculations around that, and not a simple Excel, really detailed net cash flow, kind of calculations that involves inflation correction and everything. And on the cost side, we try to optimize the implementation cost by providing smarter tools to make the cost of the project more foreseeable, more predictable.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the one thing that occurred to me as you explained that was what good news that must be for maybe your client's primary Microsoft partner to hear that you have this understanding of what they're really getting involved in, because I imagine that's not the story with every detail of a Microsoft Dynamics related project, that there's always certain elements that are perhaps a little less well understood, and this is an area where you can really lock down a lot of the needs and a lot of the planning.
And it's funny you bring it up, because of course, you're in most cases facing a sales cycle where we need to sell Dynamics with a partner. We are a pure ISV, right? So we sell our components on top of Dynamics, and even Salesforce and NetSuite and Sugar CRM, some other platforms, and SAP even. So when you're in the sales cycle with a partner, there might be exceptions, but they always have their own intellectual property they want to sell, and that you need to work with. And the sales cycle is always last minute. We need to do a demo next week, right? So The benefit here is it doesn't matter if we need to configure services or products or whatever we do. We need to set up the solution to show the right process, right? But integrating with the ISV is no limitation anymore. And even with Microsoft, we work a lot with Microsoft where they go to CPQ globally at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of cases with Microsoft Consulting running as we speak and the black belts out there. That means that you always have to work with either a customized system or with ISVs. And there's no time to build an integration. And you don't want to for a demo because you don't know if it will go through, right? So it provides a major benefit also to shorten the sales cycle. So any partner says, hey guys, I have my own industry solution, but the quoting is pretty complex and I'm not sure I should build this. We can literally connect to the database and we're good to go. So you're right.
You touched on the fact, well, you talked quite a bit actually just about how close the Experlogix team is to Microsoft, understanding Microsoft products and services in the cloud especially. Are there any particular advances in the Microsoft Business Applications world that have changed how Experlogix works with Dynamics 365 customers, maybe even Power Platform customers? Is there anything in the Microsoft roadmap that you're paying careful attention to, or perhaps that's been impactful recently?
Yeah, it's probably too much to cover in this podcast today. But first of all, I already mentioned it briefly, the integrations, right? So we did have a very good integration into Microsoft Dynamics, but the push was to get it much more flexible than it was without increasing the cost of the implementation. So that has been done. And that also opened up the door to anything that runs on the Microsoft platform because we built it in a, let's say, platform agnostic way. So in the past, we had BC, CRM, F&O, and GP, right? And of course, their predecessors, NFV and AX, and you name it. But now we have the Power Platform. We see more and more Dynamics partners using a Power App instead of a customization within the ERP or the CRM system. And last week, even with a large US-based partner, we did an implementation presentation for the Microsoft Intelligent Order Management System. We're the only CPQ that can work with that IOM. And of course, then with CRM and F&O, if that is where the order should go. So we see a variety of new solutions coming up that the partner are becoming more creative with, all based on the Power Platform that could run with Dynamics, but also could run without Dynamics. So the integration into all parts of the solution stack has become much more important. And Microsoft Commerce is another example there, right? Where we were the first and still are the only CPQ that can be embedded into Microsoft Commerce, the commerce solution that Microsoft built on top of finance and supply chain. So to be able to cover all these different combinations, it could even be combined with Salesforce, right? There's a lot of finance and supply chain and BC customers that use Salesforce as their CRM system. They want to use the CPQ solution in the front end, so in this case within Salesforce, but need to do an available to promise calculation in Business Central. So we need to work with a variety of ERP and CRM systems, and this integration solution, we call it Cloud Connect, is basically our bread and butter that facilitates that. On top of that, of course, we have the situation that the Microsoft teams also are using more ISVs these days. And we already mentioned that. So we need to be able to connect to more of that combination of solutions. And then I probably don't even have to mention it, but the whole AI influence we have these days, we have been looking at that for quite some time already. We did some pilots with Microsoft, with a large manufacturing company, for example, that builds forklifts that says, hey, I'm making a quote. And based on historic quotes, I want to see how the margin of this one compares to other ones and what I can optimize in this quote. But also things like, hey, I'm selling you an aquarium and I need to know how many goldfish I can put in an aquarium with one piranha, right? ChatGPT, tell me what to do. Or what kind of clutch do I need for my truck when I want to tow this amount of weight? So the influence of AI on how we build our solutions has been significant. We set up one team that really is looking into all the use cases we need to facilitate and slowly bring that to market. Where, of course, we are primarily focused on creating the right data to be analyzed in a secure way. We all know about the privacy issues that have been brought up in the past. So we're trying to create an environment where we can securely analyze the data, let the machine learning go through the data and come up with smart recommendations in our solution that then facilitates better sales, right? And as we said, simplify the sales processes. So on the one hand, we have a more complex ecosystem with Microsoft, and we know all how complex a CRM and an F&O deployment can be together, right? We have other solutions being built on top of the Power Platform. And then we have the new services of Microsoft, mainly AI related, that we're embedding into our platform to give our customers even more ROI.
All right, excellent. Yeah, so much still to come. We'll have to revisit some of that in another episode down the road, I think. But that's really great. Another area that this all made me think of that you've touched on a couple of times here is sort of the services aspect, like field services, I guess you'd say, maybe project services that become, I guess, a part of an overall plan. Can you talk about that at all in terms of how Experlogix clients are kind of bringing together elements of their own services delivery with CPQ? Is that something that you end up talking to them about?
Yeah, because as we said, more and more services get sold with products, right? So take the Tesla example, you don't just buy a car, you can buy a subscription on parts of the car, right? Sometimes you buy a heavy piece of equipment and you get a 1-year inspection with it. We already had the example of an engineering company that needs to set up a new building and has all kinds of difficult services. So we see a lot of services coming into the sales cycle now, where in the past everything was focused on products. So our clients realize that they are establishing different types of offers and they're asking us to set it up. If you look at the Microsoft direction there, right, everything goes into PSA, the Professional Service Automation, which of course is partly present in F&O and in Business Central. I have to say, finance and supply chain these days, right? So in the ERP system, there is some project management functionality and some service management functionality, but Microsoft wants to manage most of that in the customer engagement piece of their platform. So we see more and more where we need to work with those. We need to create projects with work breakdowns and phases and tasks, right? And create contracts and anything related to those services that needs to be as accurate as the products that they sell, because otherwise they lose money on the associated services again. And services can be very complex. It can be a 3-year running project to install 5 buildings for BMW by a big furniture manufacturer, right? With a lot of deliverables, a lot of items that need to be shipped at the right time. That goes back into the MRP again. So there's a lot involved to be able to sell the right services. So this is absolutely becoming more crucial. And we see companies now setting up a CPQ solution purely for the services themselves, as they might have simple products, but a very complex delivery process. And we need to facilitate that delivery process. So we see an absolute increase of demand for things other than only product configurations, and services becomes much more important and complex than it did in the past. Absolutely.
So I wanted to, before we ended here, I did want to get maybe a bit of a company update, I guess, from Experlogix. I know that the company recently added digital commerce through an acquisition. Can you tell us any more about that and maybe anything else in the outlook of the company that you're most excited about right now?
I was part of an organization that was acquired 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago now by Experlogix, right? So at that moment in time, when we merged those two teams together, we were around 100 people. We're around 300 people right now. So we've grown quite a bit. And the main focus of our growth is to be able to facilitate that whole multi-channel experience and with solutions that fit together but can also be sold standalone. So we have our CPQ solution where you configure your price and your quote. But a quotation needs a document generation and document automation solution. And the document automation piece we have can run as part of that overall picture. But we also have a lot of large insurance companies and banks, for example, that use this to renew their policies every year, right? Hundreds of thousands of documents. And we are working with a part of the US government that has a lot of document automation to handle. We're working with the largest insurance company in the States right now in a proof of concept. So these document automation solutions, where you generate complex documents, where you push them to workflows, where you e-sign them, where you make them available again, is very important as part of that CPQ offering. But it's also something you can really sell standalone. We have 1,500 customers running that solution also without a configurator associated. Which brings us to the e-commerce part. One of the parts that Experlogix was not having in our own portfolio, was a digital commerce solution, right? So we call it multi-channel sales. So I have my salespeople that are on the phone or go door to door. They have the CPQ solution as we have it today, but they also want to open up sales channels online, already have them, right? Where they have a B2B solution or even a direct-to-customer solution, but we need to sell configurable products. Our clients were asking more and more for an out-of-the-box offering where we cover everything. So we acquired a company called Afix, a well-established company in Ireland, that had a really great offering, mainly focused on the SAP world and the Sage world initially, that we're now quickly connecting to the Dynamics ecosystem. So with that, we can sell the Afix offering in the Dynamics ecosystem, as well as combined with our CPQ and our digital commerce offerings. But that also enables us to expand to other ecosystems with our CPQ offering, right? So in the next stage, we will be expanding our CPQ offering into the ecosystems where the digital commerce solution was active. So it extends our product portfolio, but it also expands our reach into different ecosystems that we wanted to associate ourselves with because, well, as you know, CRM especially is not just limited to customers that are using an ERP system from Microsoft. There's also SAP. There's also other solutions like NetSuite that we need to integrate with to have an optimal flow between the sales process and the follow-up in the back end. So we're expanding our portfolio with solutions that can help us in that direction. And we're very excited about this. The first results are very promising. And we're looking forward to maybe discuss on the next podcast how that all works together.
All right. Well, as I suspected, I mean, so many different corners of the world related to CPQ that are worth discussing and plenty more to talk about, as you said, next time. But for this discussion, Peter, I really want to thank you. Always fun. And thanks for being here and sharing an update on where Experlogix is at today. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for your time, Jason. And looking forward to the next one.
That's it for this episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks once again to Peter for joining me. And this message from Experlogix. For more information on Experlogix and reasons why to invest in CPQ software, check out the links in the show notes. And that's it for this episode. If you want to get in touch with me, you can send me an email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. For all of our updates, please do follow us on LinkedIn or on Twitter. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.